What's up everybody? Welcome back to another truck camper video. I know it's been a few weeks, so it's great to be back in the truck camper doing this recap series. In the last few videos, I talked about how I purchased the camper and some of the initial mounting to get the camper onto the truck, my Toyota Tacoma. In this video, I'll be talking about how I slowly slipped into a full rebuild. Not originally the plan, and we'll cover all of that. So, if you're interested in how this truck camper went from somewhat usable old 80s truck camper down to a completely stripped down camper, which became this beautiful rebuilt camper that I now have, stay tuned. Just a quick reminder that all of this is over at my build page on wanderthewest.com, and I'm also redoing my personal website, tgmorrissey.com. I'm going to have a whole truck camper section that kind of shows the truck camper, has some cool interactive videos and things like that, so be on the lookout for that. It's not ready quite yet, but it's coming soon. Before we continue this video, I forgot one really important thing. Let me go grab it and I'll be right back. Almost forgot my new favorite hat, and that is my four-wheel camper hat. Reached out to the guys over at Four-Wheel Camper, told them about everything. They're very aware of my build series and my videos, and they're actually nice enough to send me over some hats, some shirts, some stickers, things like that. I'll actually be sharing some of that with y'all on the channel. And they also sent me over some new parts to get this camper installed on my new Tundra. And so they are actually an official sponsor for an upcoming video. Not quite this video, but you know, they are really good friends anyway, so give them a huge shout out over on fourwheelcamper.com. So thankful that they've decided to work with me on this channel to some capacity. We're just feeling it out right now, but hopefully we'll be doing bigger and better things in the coming year. So now that I got my new favorite hat on, it is time to get into this recap series, which is again talking about tearing down this entire camper pretty much to its base aluminum. Real quick, before we get into the teardown, I did use this camper for the first winter that I bought it. So I bought it in a September of, 2016? I think, yeah, September of 2016, and I did use it through that winter. So I actually drove it out to Ohio to visit my grandmother, then I used it for quite a few ski trips. As you can see here, I actually had a friend out, we went skiing for a couple of weeks, that was a great time, or excuse me, a couple of days. That was a great time, and then used it on and off with my wife. Actually, the first time we ever camped in this thing was on Rabbit Ear Pass out by Steamboat, and it was insanely cold, like -25 or something like that. That was one of our first nights. That first winter really taught me that I absolutely did love this camper and that I did want to fix it up and get everything going. So with that, let's get into fixing it up. So one of the first things on my list of to-dos after I had used this camper for the first ski season was to just get all the ski gear out of it and start to just see where I really stood. The camper was pretty dirty. I never actually did that deep of a clean with it. And one of the first things that came to mind after I cleaned everything up as best I could with just wiping it down and some cleaners was that the roof was really in pretty rough shape. And by roof, I mean the ceiling, the interior roof, the headliner. It was dirty, it was ripped, it was just in pretty much disrepair. And so I decided I wanted to replace that headliner, that material here on the inside of the ceiling. So actually my brother-in-law was in town that weekend, and he helped me out, and we just came in here, popped the roof, and started ripping things down. I was really surprised as we started tearing into it that all the insulation in the roof was actually in surprisingly good shape. I didn't see any significant water damage whatsoever, which is kind of surprising considering there was no vent when I bought this and there was a big 14-inch diameter hole in the roof. Don't know how that worked out, but I was perfectly happy to see it. So it was all this old fiberglass insulation that I ripped out. Again, all in great shape, but I did have plans to put in better insulation in the future. I knew right then that with access to the roof for the first time, I'd go ahead and put some fresh wires in for my exterior roof lights and also put more wires in too. Because I use this in the winter so much, I wanted to have a lot of light because it was going to be dark so often. So as you can see now, I did end up putting 4 lights in, and I don't regret that at all. I think it was one of my best decisions. So I knew that was going to be something on the docket, and that will be in a future video. With the roof tore down, I will start using this phrase, a slippery slope, and I will be using it a lot more because I really did just kind of tear into one thing and then say, might as well tear into that as well. So the roof came down, and then I was looking at the floor, and the floor was completely beat up as well. So I just grabbed my hammer, the back side of it, and started peeling up the floor. It came up suspiciously easy. That floor just came out in a matter of minutes. Again, it wasn't necessarily terrible. I think it was an old linoleum. It's been a while since then, but those tiles just came right out. So we just said, hey, we're doing a new floor too. Started ripping everything out. Still didn't know I was doing a full rebuild at this time. Just figured one more thing that could spruce up the place a little bit. My original plan with that floor was that because it was only 21 square feet, I figured I'd be able to get some cheap leftover flooring from maybe the used home goods store or something like that. And I actually did go through 2 different renditions of flooring on this. I'll be covering that first initial floor in a later video in this series, and then also the newest floor that I have right now is already covered in another video as well. So that floor came out. I knew it would be a quick, small cost project. Hence why I did go ahead and jump into that. Also, as I ripped up that floor, I could kind of see what the baseboard was, which is really the structural bottom of this camper. A lot of folks in the community call this the floorpack, right? And that's actually made out of plywood for a 4-wheel camper. I heard they actually purposely use a plywood and not an aluminum down here so that this can flex as the truck bed flexes as you're going off-road and around corners and things like that. I don't really know much more beyond that, except I did notice that my floor pack was in pretty decent shape. As you'll see by the time we get through this entire video series, this is really one of the only things that remained on my camper originally. The floor pack and the frame and the roof. That's it. And so this floor pack seemed to be in fine shape. A couple of holes, couple of dents, and you'll see in a second that I'll start fixing that up over time. In hindsight, maybe I wish I actually had replaced this floor pack. A lot of folks that have done a full rebuild, such as myself, do replace this. They'll actually widen it for a modern truck, make it fit whatever truck they're designing it for perfectly. Now in hindsight, since I've already moved on from my Toyota, which I had originally, my Tacoma, which I had originally, moved on to my Tundra now, that floor pack wouldn't have been custom shaped anyways. I'm plenty happy that I kept it. Maybe knowing that I did end up doing 2 years of full rebuild, I would have done it, but there's no point in second guessing an armchair quarterbacking anymore. It's working just fine for what we need, so very happy with everything. With that floor up and out and the decision to keep the floor pack, this was really the time when I told myself in for an inch, in for a mile. That's when I just started ripping out more and more stuff. Literally over the course of one weekend, I completely gutted this camper. I'm sure if any of you have ever done a project like this before, you know the demo goes an awful lot faster than the rebuild. This is a prime example of that. After I kind of got the floor up, then I started looking at the walls and some of the panels down here and said, you know, those don't look that great either. Why don't I check those out? So then I was kind of pulling off walls and saying, not good insulation back here either. Why doesn't that come out? And I'll redo that as well. Over on the Galley side, the original cabinets were, they left something to be desired. We'll just say that. I think 4-wheel campers come a long way since that initial design. It was poorly optimized back then. It was all with really thin, borderline cardboard wood, real 80s style paneling, and not just overly functional at all. Really what had happened was when I took that Galley out, that's when I saw kind of the walls behind it, and I said, if I'm going to put a new Galley in, I might as well take out the walls too. So that's when all the walls came out and the insulation as well. It really just kept going one layer deeper and deeper, and I kept seeing that, hey, if I'm going to do all of this work, I might as well do this step as well, or this step as well. In general, though, the kind of teardown went very, very nicely. I had no surprises. I got a lot of inspiration from that website I talk about all the time, wanderthewest.com. A plethora of other folks have redone campers just like this before, and sometimes they see some kind of ruder surprises, like cracks in the aluminum frame, broken joints, things like that. I was super fortunate to have none of that. My frame looked to be in great contact. This was at the time when I still didn't realize I would do a full canvas rebuild as well, but about the weekend after I said, oh my god, I'm already this deep into it, might as well do that too. So pretty quickly after I dedicated myself to that. This entire project from that point took about 2 years to get where we are today. The camper's like 95% done today. The electrical's not 100% still, but who needs electricity anyways? As this decision really came to me that I was doing a full rebuild and that I wouldn't really be using the camper much that summer, because again, I did this teardown right in the beginning of the spring because I use this mostly in the winter, that's when I did start to say to myself, all right, I will do that sideliner this summer, get this camper back into a shell type form, so none of the cabinetry, none of the cushions or anything, just a raw shell, that the following winter I can start using it, build it out more and more as I go, as I learn what I really want to see out of this thing. And so that's what my game plan was. Camper was torn down to the base, paint it to get it a little healthier on the outside and inside, get a new liner on there, a new roof, and get it operational again as quickly as possible. Definitely underestimated how long that would take me originally, but you know, I'm still happy I did the project. Just took a little while. A few more details about the teardown that I forgot to mention earlier. The bench was pretty super basic. It had the nastiest old carpet I've ever seen. That all had to come out. That was stapled down. So then all of a sudden I was pulling a bunch of staples. That took me forever. And as I pulled staples, I was kind of pulling wood out of the plywood and stuff like that. So I ended up going back in behind it with a wood filler, filling everything in, sanding it all nice, and bringing this floor pack back to a nice healthy state. At that time when I'd taken this bench out, that's when I took out this front bench area as well. This looked like it had been a homemade job. It was plenty functional for the time being, just put in with some corner braces and a piece of plywood. Worked for that, but again, I'm doing this bench, might as well do that bench too. It all came out. One other thing about the Galley I forgot to mention earlier is that I had originally planned, actually, this was kind of naive of me probably, I had taken all the pieces off of the Galley and tried not to break them so I could use them as like a template to rebuild it the way it was originally. Kind of once I thought about it more and more, I was like, oh, that's actually not nearly as functional as I want. For instance, none of this cabinet was here at all, and I love this cabinet now. It's a perfect pantry. So that was something that was interesting. Big shout out to my wife. She let me actually store those in our guest bedroom for quite a long time before I had this garage. So she was a real trooper as I brought in dank, old, musky wood and put it in our guest room. So thanks, Elise. And the last kind of thing about the Galley that was interesting was the water tank. The previous owner, when they were trying to do some modifications themselves, had actually taken a wood screw and put it through the water tank by accident. So a water tank with holes in it isn't the most functional thing in the world. It also had some mystery ports on the top that I was unfamiliar with. So that whole water tank had to be taken out. Went back and forth. I've probably talked about this before in my other water videos about what type of water tank to use, but I will just remind you, huge shout out to someone over on the forums that I frequent a lot who actually gave me their old water tank for free, and it worked great for me, so huge thanks to that person. I really appreciate it. And then, of course, the sink and the stove, those are just metal pieces, so they can only get so damaged. The sink was in completely fine shape. The stove had a little bit of rust on it, but both those I actually restored and put back in this camper, and they're perfectly functional today. So if you're any interested at all about the sink or the stove project, I'll link to them up there, but they went in nicely in the end. So I took those out, had the plan of saving them, and did end up saving them through it. One other thing that I pulled out was the 120 system in this camper. I have no intentions of ever plugging into like an RV park or anything like that. I have stayed at RV parks before just when I'm in a pinch, but I really don't think I need 120 in this camper. If I ever do have a low battery and I'm near 120, I can always just run an extension cord and charge my battery with my little portable charger. So I made that decision early to rip that 120 out and to not put any new 120 back into this thing. So living with that right now, and absolutely no regrets whatsoever. I don't think you need it. So many things run off 12 volt DC these days anyways. It's super easy to get around it. With those paneling, one of the last and hardest things to take out was the rear wall, the wall by the door that you're looking at me on. And the reason for that is because the lifter panel actually overlapped that wall. That meant the lifter panel had to come off temporarily in order to pull the panels out. Again, this kind of layering thing, and the reason I decided to just take this thing all the way down. To actually work around that, I just supported the roof with some 2x4s temporarily, took off the bottom of that lifter panel, the lifter panel, rip the paneling, the wall paneling out, and then put that lifter panel back on. Not the hardest thing in the world, but definitely not the easiest thing in the world either. So if you're ever going to do one of these restores, just keep that in mind. When I actually re-walled this thing, I did keep that in mind, and those are two separate pieces now. So where the roof attaches to the base of the camper is one piece of wall, and then there's separate pieces of wall below that. That way if I ever need to get to my electrical or something, or my insulation, I can remove my wall panels without removing my lifter mechanism, which is a huge bonus. Hopefully I never have to do any of it, but make things maintenanceable moving forward. So that was my idea there. With the demo pretty much at the bottom of the teardown, the only other things I did do was I put a new hole in the floor pack for a fourth pass-through panel for a fourth tie-down. So that maybe I'll cover it as I build this thing back up, but it's a hole in the floor pack. It was a pretty basic project. that now really gets us gutted out of this camper. It was at this point that I really started to think that I bit off more than I could chew. I just kind of looked around at this completely gutted camper and was like, oh my goodness, there's a lot of work to do. But I wasted no time whatsoever, and I got right into the building stage. I actually spent a ton of time taking measurements and sketching this entire camper up. I had plans of putting it into CAD and sharing that with everyone. If there's enough interest in this video, give me a comment below, and I would whip up a CAD file for everybody of what this camper is. Full disclosure though, who knows how my measurement poles were. Now they're on just a technical drawing floating around my garage somewhere, so they could be off, but it would be a great start for someone that ever wanted to build one of these from scratch. So let me know, I could be talked into it if there was enough interest. I spent so much time with those drawings because I didn't want to make any costly mistakes. I was in the heat of grad school during this rebuild. Money's tight, and I just didn't want to have to buy new materials left and right. All those mistakes, while none of the material for this camper at all is overly expensive, mistakes start to add up pretty quickly. You got to go buy another $25 piece of plywood, whatever it is. Do that too many times, and all of a sudden this project costs an awful lot more than it really needed to. So I spent a ton of nights in this camper pulling tape, measuring things, planning out everything. I think in the walls, I don't think I made any serious mistakes. I think some that were fixable, I just had to like cut wider windows, but we'll look into that in the future videos. So spent a ton of time looking at those drawings, making those drawings. Here's some slideshow of that, and then I will link below where you can find more of those drawings, just the still images if you ever want to check them out. With that discussion of how I was drawing this up, how I started to plan everything, that really does wrap up this video. Future videos for this recap series include painting the exterior of this camper, doing the interior panelings, the ceilings, the carpentry around the walls, all things like that. That'll be one huge video because that was a huge amount of work, but I think it all goes together nicely, which is essentially interior shell work for this camper. Then I will spend a little bit of time actually talking about how the bed works and how I had originally made that, and then also talk about the ceiling. The ceiling and the bed were some of the last projects I did before I started getting into YouTube and making videos. So that will really finish out the recap series, but both very interesting projects. So a handful of more videos coming out in this exact series, this exact format. Maybe someday this camper is going to actually get on my Tundra. Hopefully that'll happen soon. Keep dropping me comments to encourage me to do it. I will find time on the weekends sometime. As always, thank you for watching. If you aren't already, do consider subscribing. I love making these videos for you all, and I love all the comments and the feedbacks and everything like that. Share these videos with your friends. Let them know what great stuff we're doing over on this channel. As always, thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next one.